This podcast is brought to you by The Shift.
This podcast is brought to you first and foremost by the patrons on the Storytime Superhero tier on Patreon. Please consider becoming a patron of the podcast if you aren't already. And this podcast is also sponsored by Skillshare. So during the month of April, sign up for Skillshare using my link below and get 40% off a yearly subscription. The link is in the description box on YouTube and in the show notes on the audio platforms. So members of Skillshare have access to over 135,000 classes in music, design, web development, photography, animation, illustration, and much more. Classes can include prompts, resources, hands-on projects, and you can also share, collaborate, and network with the growing community of millions of creators on Skillshare. I myself used Skillshare to teach myself code at the very beginning of COVID lockdown last year. And even though I did eventually get bored and give up, just being honest, I did learn how to run a module in Python that told me I had a lovely name. And when I entered my friend Kelly's name, it told her that Carol Baskin killed her husband. That was a joke that made sense in March 2020. Here's a joke that made sense a year ago, okay? So click the link in the description below for 40% off a yearly subscription when you sign up in April 2021. And after that, if you're listening to this podcast, after that, use code Clisare, CLISARE, for a 2-month trial, a free 2-month trial. So let's get on with the episode.
It's story time.
So hello and welcome back to the Storytime Podcast. My name is Claire. I go by Clisare on the internet, and this is a podcast where people tell me stories. And I have not a repeat guest, but I have Derek with me here from the Weekly Wheatley, a podcast that I was recently on. And so we're like exchanging podcasts. But thank you so much for joining.
No, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and do you want to tell everyone where to find you, where to find your podcast, everything else?
Yeah, we're on YouTube, the Weekly Wheatley, and we're also on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and then the usual spots, you know, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all that stuff.
It's not video on YouTube, isn't it? Now it's audio.
It just became video last week, so
wow.
Yeah, I have you to thank for my new microphone, because when you were on, I realized how poor my microphone sounded in comparison to yours. So I said, right, I got to spend some money on a proper microphone. And then as I was doing that, I got a proper camera for the laptop. So now, yeah, we're up to date.
Yeah, it sounds and looks great.
Thank you very much. I'm happy with it.
The one thing that I learned when doing this podcast, you know, because I feel like you learn a lot when you're recording online, and you learn it the hard way as well, unfortunately. But I remember I was recording a podcast with Sean Burke, who's like, oh my God, I love Sean Burke, go back years, big fan of all his stuff. And I plugged in these earphones, like these phone earphones, and it automatically changed the microphone input. So I was using the really, you know, good mic in front of me. Yeah. And it wasn't the one taking in the sound. Afterwards, I was like, oh my God, that's so annoying.
That was a worry for me with these as well, because I normally wear bigger ones, but only when I'm like, you know, in charge. Yeah. So yeah. I was worried about this, but I think I'm all right.
Yeah, no, so that's why I was like, even before starting this one with you, I was like, hang on, let me just double check that it's taken in the right microphone. But yeah, it looks and sounds great. And yeah, check out the Weekly Wheatley. It's on, as you said, it's on YouTube and all the good audio platforms. And you'll give me all those links, and I'll put them all down in the description so people can go click them and find them. And I'll put the link down to my episode down in the description as well, just to make people's lives easier if they want to listen to that one. And so what are we going to talk about now this week?
Well, today I thought I'd kind of keep it on brand kind of a thing, because the podcast started because of my experiences with mental health, and I guess the best thing really was for me to kind of talk about it and my journey along the way, and to get where I am now. It's quite a big jump, really.
Yeah. And it's a topical enough conversation, I suppose, as well, because, you know, as we were chatting just before we started the podcast here, like the day that we're recording this, there's been new announcements on lockdown and stuff. And I think I feel a lot of disappointment over what hasn't relaxed.
Yeah.
And I know that there will be a lot of people sort of struggling with their mental health in the next there's a lot of people already struggling, you know yourself, but it unfortunately, we didn't get the relief we were expecting on this particular day.
No, I also think, Claire, that like, people are struggling at the moment, a lot, and everybody who's kind of trying to remain positive is trying to help other people along, which is brilliant. But I think the big worry down the line is once the lockdown is over, it's going to be very hard for people to adapt into the society and the way we kind of work, particularly for the ones that have been suffering from anxiety, because that's a massive thing for people to get out and about. It's very much a cocoon kind of a thing for people with anxiety, and I'd include myself, where I've become quite happy with being like away from people and in a house and reading books and watching films and all these things that sound really nice. But I know that like when this is over, I'll have to go back out into the big bad world as it is, and I think that's going to be a massive thing. And, we're just not equipped as a country in regards to mental health care. And
we never were.
No, you're right. We never were. And it's just, we'll get into it, I suppose, but it's just that idea of someone who's, having suicidal thoughts and being like I'm talking about, really, really feeling very afraid. And they're told to come back in 3 or 4 months for an appointment, and it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope like we can help other people along, the people who are able to do it, and that's what talking about it is so good and making it so normal. Because it is a normal thing. It can happen to anyone, So yeah, I guess.
And that's a really interesting point that I hadn't considered, is that because for me it's like an extrovert, in a cage. That's kind of how it feels. Because I suppose I manage my mental health, and I have done for a number of years, using things like sport and like being able to meet people and stuff like that. But yeah, I didn't think of it from the other side of people who already have anxiety with meeting people. And now it's potentially maybe gotten worse because it's been so long since they've been able to meet people. And that's going to be a barrier then that they have to get over when I'm like, yay, I'm out of my cage kind of thing. There's going to be some people who feel the opposite. And that's really interesting and really good for me to remember, I think, as well. Because, you tend to sometimes only think of your own.
Yeah, but that's all right. Yeah, that's all right too. But that's just like, it's kind of one of those things. I don't think of you as just running out and being so happy, because I'm so worried about me. It's just a natural thing. It's not like anything bad. So I also think that the guilt thing about people who, may not have experienced mental health, and they want to reach out to someone, but they feel kind of guilty for being happy about things. That's kind of a thing you don't want to be there. You don't have to feel guilty about it, because it just hasn't affected your life, and it's great, So yeah, it's very complicated what's going to happen in the next few months. So I just hope that people are, helpful and ready for it.
Yeah. So you have a mental health podcast, and it's just take us right to the beginning.
Okay, so
it's always a good place to start.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I was trying to think a bit about this, but there is a beginning of kind of the worst part. But just to lead up to it, like when I was 21, I was diagnosed with having depression and insomnia. So I was drinking an awful lot at the time, and you're handed pills, and I'm kind of, at the time, I was quite self-destructive, not knowing why. And I started to abuse the sleeping tablets in particular. And I was drinking an awful lot, and I kind of became upset with myself about it. And I decided, right, I'm not going to take the pills anymore, including the antidepressant. I just said it wasn't for me. And I kept drinking, unfortunately, and smoking weed and doing things that you shouldn't be doing. But it's just a form of trying to get away from yourself. You don't like who you are. And I didn't realize that. So I guess when I got to the age of 27, and I decided, right, I'm not going to drink anymore. And not knowing that was the crutch, that really was what was keeping me together. And that doesn't sound positive. It wasn't positive, but in the sense, that's what was holding me up. So when I gave up cigarettes and drink on the same day, which is probably it's not the best idea, particularly when you're feeling bad and you're not sleeping. And so I was going for 6 days, and the day that I had the kind of the bigger breakdown that I had, I was pacing my apartment, and I remember little bits and pieces, and I remember there was tennis on the TV, just kind of a thing. These random kind of things, bits that you remember. And I was pacing, and I didn't really know why. And then this kind of voice, it was my own voice. It wasn't an intrusive, voice from someone else. Just popped into my head and said, "Go to the knife in the kitchen and cut your wrists." So I just started walking because it was just loud, and everything else was so confused and jumping around my head that I just said, "Well, that's what I want to do. Then that's my my own command. So I'll go." I got to about, say, five steps from the drawer, and I stopped, and I can't really remember the exact feeling, but I thought, right, this isn't obviously a good idea, but it was kind of a bit more than that. There was a lot more going on in my head, but that was kind of came out kind of, I suppose, clearer than the rest. And I walked into my bedroom, and I lay down flat in the bed, and I didn't know what to do. I was just a panic, and the voice was still there, and anxiety was in my chest, and it was just everything that could go wrong was going wrong. And I decided to ring my mom, and she was in Portugal at the time, and she said, "You've got to go down to your dad." Now I know she called him, and they don't speak. They separated a long time ago. So she called him, and she said something. Now I know, right? I know I cycled from my apartment to my dad's house through the town that was busy. I don't remember any of the cycle, and even like 10 minutes later, I just remember, thinking, "How did I get down here?" Because it was, everything was going off. The weirdest part then was the next few hours. I was with my dad, and was just having dinner and watching TV, and I felt quite nervous. My chest felt quite tight, but I wasn't having any thoughts of suicidal ideation, none of that kind of stuff. But then I went down to my room then, and I spent the night holding on to the mattress, to either side of the mattress, because I felt if I let go, I was going to get up and go back to the kitchen and do what I wanted to do. And I remember not sleeping much. You're kind of going in and out of it, and you're trying to concentrate. The weird thing about something like that, you're just grasping onto something, And my thing was like shaking my leg. So I was shaking my leg. I was holding the mattress, and I drifted in and out of sleep. And when I woke up, I heard my dad getting ready to go to work. Now, it would have only been my dad in the house, and myself. And I just started bawling, crying. I couldn't understand that. My thoughts was, if he goes, I will take my own life. Like there's no safety net there. So I went up, and being an Irish son and an Irish dad, there's not much emotional chats along the way. We're very close, but not in the sense of like, having good, like a way I could talk to my mom. I suppose that's the best way of putting it. But he saw me crying, and he kind of, obviously got into a panic, and we walked around to the doctor. So we got into the doctor, and there was the mention of St. Lomans in Mullingar, the psychiatric hospital, and I had seen my friend in there a few years before, and I just thought, this isn't a place to get better. It just frightened me when I was in there at the time. So I said no. So I was put on some Xanax and put on some a mild antidepressant, and said, you have to come back in 3 days, and we have to put you through a psychiatric evaluation. A psychologist was going to come in, but you can't really be out of anyone's sight. Yeah. You got to be with your dad. If he goes to work, you've got to go to work with him. You've got to, bring your laptop or whatever, So.
And sorry, I'm just struck by the fact you said you were trying to give up the antidepressants and the sleeping tablets, and then they prescribed you more.
I think when I look at it, it was kind of the fact that I was drinking so much at the time that, when you have a few drinks, you get a little bit brave, or you get angry, or whatever way you are. And I think that was my, way of just disregarding the tablets. But I think obviously I was a bit older, a few years older, and I thought, this is like serious now. Like, this is like, your own mind telling you, it's time to go. So I understand, like, people, like, the tablet thing is so, it's very complicated, and I'm sure you've talked to people about before. Everybody has an opinion about them, but for me, the whole medication has to go along with therapy. It doesn't work with just medication. And to be fair, I will say, like, there is people who've just gone to therapy and done it without medication, and that's fine too. I would never like have a go at anybody for doing either or, but you know.
So you weren't against it. I just assumed you'd be sort of against. So you were open to the idea at the time then.
Yeah, I was absolutely open to it, and I knew that particularly anxiety. Like, anxiety is this, just runs rampant if it's unchecked, you know. And I thought, you know, to be given I was just given a mild, a small dosage of Xanax it was, and just to get me to, it was kind of seen to get me through the weekend, I guess, and it was. It did, you know. My dad was very good at kind of distracting me. My brother was around, and he had like 2 small kids at the time. So all of these things are kind of reminding you that, like, I had this idea in my mind of my mom crying at my funeral, you know. And when you're in your very worst, even though that sounds like a horrific image, it's what keeps you going as well, because you don't know what else to kind of grab onto.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So I think I went to the evaluation anyway, and I was diagnosed with severe depression and severe anxiety. So they did set up an appointment, and, you know, I was rushed through a bit for that, you know, luckily enough, because I know, and I've gone in and out of the care, you know. I've been into Westmead's medical centre for the care there, and I've been to Roscommon. And if you go out of the system, the trouble is getting back into the system and getting back into, you know, an appointment. It might be 3 or 4 months. So thankfully they rushed me through. And what I will say about the therapy that I received, and I went to a psychologist, and she was just incredible. I connected with her immediately. She was very much, you know, I had someone on recently talking about how they speak in terms of, we will get through this, and we will get you better. And it's just something that drags you in. You just feel like there's 2 of you then. There's like a little team. And I also had a cognitive behavioral therapist, which I'm a lot of people have heard of CBT. It's the best treatment that I got, particularly with almost trying to build yourself up from the very bottom, you know. I had to start again. Like, my first task after the 3rd session was to just walk through the town. The next was just go in and order a coffee somewhere, and then you can leave. So it was like just tiny little pushes along the way. And, you know, it was I always take, you know, many good points from it, but I never smoked again, and I never drank again. So that was a positive. But I think back of it now and thinking, how did I not just buy a packet of cigarettes? Like, because I just, every little bit of anxiety, you know, the first thing you think of when you're a smoker is, a cigarette will solve this or help me out. And,
and it's even the association, like, even if it doesn't actually help, it just feels comforting. Yeah. You've associated it with feeling better, so therefore you have it, and even if it doesn't work, you sort of, it's really hard to. So fair play to you. I don't know. That's really impressive.
It's weird, but I suppose when, you know, it's that whole thing of like, something so severe is happening to you that for most of the day you don't think about cigarettes, or you don't think about alcohol. It's just like when you get that little bit of rest, maybe from a respite. But, you know, it's what, like, my parents were amazing, because my mom lived in Athlone at the time as well. So I could kind of travel between the 2 of them. I remember never going back to the apartment, because the association side of it was just terrifying, to go back to a place that had happened. But at the same time, there was moments where I went to my mom's, and I was going back to my father's, and I started bawling, crying, because I had really, really a really, really bad night that night, you know. And all the way that your mind works in such extraordinary like manners, in good ways, obviously, but in bad ways. When it's bad, it's really bad. I was put on, so, you know, the thing about the medication side of things, I guess I should address, is I was put on a number of types of medication. I'm actually on 5 at the moment, 5 different types.
5 different types?
Yeah, like, so when they diagnosed me with depression, I didn't feel, I did, obviously I knew it was depression, but I felt that there was something else there. And I didn't really, I don't have the confidence to go into a doctor or a psychiatrist and tell them, I don't think this is a right, diagnosis. And I did kind of start exploring the idea that there was something else. It couldn't just be what they told me. And I spoke to my mom about it, and we kind of studied it a bit. And I thought, I found this thing called bipolar 2. Now, obviously I knew bipolar, but I didn't know what bipolar 2 was. So it's
Yeah, I didn't even know there's two different kinds.
yeah, I literally learned it like when I just started studying it. And it's kind of I guess a weaker version of bipolar. The highs aren't as high and the lows aren't as low. They're not as frequent either.
Yeah.
They tend to be more easier to manage with the medication. So, like, if you have bipolar and you're on lithium, you might have to take a large amount of lithium, which is tough on the system. I have to take 1,000 milligrams of lithium for bipolar 2. But when I approached the psychiatrist, I showed him like my notes and stuff, and I was like, and he didn't say it on the spot. Now, he kind of thought it was interesting and stuff like that. Now, in the end, the next time I went back to him, he decided that this is what it was. They did the whole lithium thing. It's such a weird thing how they all work off each other, and sometimes each medication and each different tablet works badly with another one.
Yeah.
So you end up, I'm on like, well, I've been on it now for 6 or 7 years, but I'm on my fourth different type of antidepressant because the other three just weren't working. The terrifying kind of idea of antidepressants to people is for the first 4 to 6 weeks, you are more likely to maybe even get, more suicidal ideation. It's almost makes you worse before you get better, which is, obviously very tough for people.
It's sort of like you have to level out after a couple of weeks, is it? You sort of... Yeah.
It does that. Yeah, exactly. It brings you down before it brings you up a bit. Now, I was given stuff for, like, I was given Lyrica, which is essentially used for people with nerve pain. But around the time that I was given it, it had been kind of sanctioned to be used as for anxiety in itself. And I was put on this thing called metrazepam. But it was one of those, I think that's what it's called. I can't remember. It's the one that was able to drop. But it just left me zombified. And I think I've heard people say good things about it, but it's the knock-on effect of being with other tablets that it just doesn't necessarily go into my body and decide that everything is fine, But yeah, so that's the medication side of things. It's been draining at times. We
can be a bit of trial and error, can it?
Very much so, yeah.
They mix together.
I think the initial antidepressant is always quite a tough one to kind of judge. And when they gave me my first one, I can't remember what it was called, but it was one that was quite hard on my system in the sense of just, I was hitting a point in the middle of the day where everything just was going out and I was so exhausted. And of course, that doesn't necessarily mean it's that exact tablets doing it. It could be the combination of each tablet. And, and like I got to, the one I'm on now has been good. I've been on it for years now, like 6 or 7 years. So it's been very, good for me in that sense. And while you establish that base, that's when, the therapy starts to kick in. And I was so, if you're feeling a bit down in a day or a bit anxious in a day, you don't want to see anyone. You don't want to interact with anyone. I was like that, like for, maybe 3 or 4 years at the start. And meeting people was exhausting. I didn't really take any pride in my appearance that much anymore. I was tired all the time. My creativity was wiped out. And that's something that made me very, very happy. I think, for people who are creative, like yourself, like when something like that is taken from you, and it's because of a tablet you're on, it's very, it can really annoy you.
I wouldn't want to take. It'd make me not want to take the tablet. But then you're between a rock and a hard place because you're taking the tablet because you want to take it for the other reasons. So yeah, God, that must have been tough.
Yeah, and it's. it's one of those things where you take it because you know it's going to get you better, but
Yes.
you hate having to take it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Sorry, that's what I was trying to say in a very
Yeah.
roundabout way. Yeah.
it's a bizarre thing. So when I started to kind of come out of the state of, you know, fugue I was in, I suppose, I met with a couple of good friends that kind of hung in there for me, you know, that were, because it's very easy to lose friends as well, because it's not their fault. It's just the fact that you don't respond to anything, and they don't have the skills to kind of get you out of it. So it was really down to me. So once I started kind of coming out of it, I started meeting people in you know, coffee shops and things, and it became quite a challenge. But you know, obviously the more you do it, it's like anything. The more you do it, the easier it gets. And I think, you know, I have a couple of, you know, friends like that really got me through certain things. And what happened after that was fitness, you know, getting fit and trying to move your limbs, do something, like even if it's like in the early morning and you're absolutely exhausted, and you know that, you know, the tablets you're on, or you're struggling with them or whatever, just to kind of get moving, get running, walking. And I started to join a gym, and all these things started to combine to be really positive, you know, things for me. But you're like, we're all tested every day anyway. It's not just people who have mental health problems, but for the people with mental health problems, it's almost like having, you know, having that test, but having something heavy on your back too, and having to do it. And you know, people were so good to me in the sense that they went away and wanted to learn, you know, what I was going through, ways that could help me. My mom was brilliant at that. She would study every time she heard of a, you know, a tablet that I might be taking, or, you know, anything that could help, anything that could be positive. She was going to do it. And it's even getting along to gigs, you know, a couple of gigs that were something that I said I'd never do again, because it was like, you know, going into the 3 Arena and it's packed full of people. She got me in there a couple of times, and you know, got me to enjoy it somehow, you know. But it's tough, but you do learn an awful lot about yourself along the way. That's the one thing, and you learn you know, what's really important. And I think I improved as a human being, as well as just a kind of mood wise, you know. What I found out about mental health, like after all of this stuff and all the things that happened to me, was that people were willing to engage with it. You know, I thought immediately that everybody's going to think, oh God, he's a freak, or you know, whatever. But that wasn't the case. I decided that I'd start writing some blogs, and just shared them on Facebook to my friends. So I started basically like I started here at the very start, and slowly went through, you know, the big experiences, and then even the smaller ones that were kind of hard to manage and people mightn't have thought of. And I started putting them up, and because I was in the gym here in town, and there's a lot of people that are very good people, they all started, you know, contacting me and saying, you know, we really enjoyed them. It sounds tough. They'd ask me certain things about anxiety and certain things about depression that they may not have known before, or they just wanted to confirm, because, you know, everybody has or knows somebody who has gone through certain things. So yeah, I kept writing them, and I got up to, I think I did around 20 or so, and I kind of had exhausted that route, and I thought, what else could I do that would be positive, and not just for me, because it is massively positive for me, but for other people. And how could I get other people involved? Because a blog is just me, you know, and maybe people in the comment section or whatever, and that was great too. But I wanted to kind of get some people's opinions and some voices and the different experiences that they've had. So that's why I decided to set up the podcast for it. And I decided to, like, you know, I think people will read stuff and maybe not take it all in. I know I will. And I read, you know, a fair bit, and I go back 2 pages and, like, I don't remember any of that kind of thing. So people will respond better to a voice or a picture or a video. And I decided the best thing to do was to go and do the podcast. But for the first couple of episodes, just tell everything again from the start, going proper into the kind of, the gory details. And I thought, it'd be great to get some guests on here and to share their experiences and to learn things about, we had someone with schizoaffective disorder, and it again, we have like a cartoon image of things like schizophrenia, or bipolar is another one where you could throw in there, where we think what we've seen on like Coronation Street or something, where it's someone's really high and then they're really low, and that's it. But there's so much more in the middle. And schizophrenia is a similar thing, where we think it's just voices, but there's so much more to it with visions and things like that. So I thought we'd get people on to talk about all those kind of things, and I knew I'd learn from it, and it would benefit me. But it's much more far-reaching than that. Like if it's it's 50 or 100 people tune in, they've learned something, and they've kind of taken away that that person has schizoaffective disorder, but they seem grand, because we do expect. I don't know, if you don't know about the illness, you do expect them to be a little bit weird. That's what we always think, and it just shows when I talk to someone for an hour that they're cool. Like it's just another thing. It's just something that they have,
that
and
they deal with.
Yeah, and yourself, everybody deals with physical conditions. It's like, if you broke your leg, you couldn't treat it yourself, and it's the same goes for depression or anything else. You can't treat it yourself, and you need people around you, and not just medical professionals. I'm talking about like friends and loved ones and all that. And I've been lucky in that sense that I've had some people who really wanted to help.
I think just because you mentioned the broken leg thing, so I feel like I've broken a few bones in my time, and I feel like it's easy enough to kind of rock up to A&E and you pay your A&E charge. And then for a lot of what you do after that, it's covered, in the Irish healthcare system. And I suppose I'm wondering about, are there any supports available there for mental health? Because I know that, a couple of years ago, maybe when I was struggling, I sort of felt like it was going to be really expensive to talk to someone or see anyone. And I never, I always tried to sort of deal with it myself rather than reach out because of that. And was that totally wrong? Is there any kind of, that you're aware of, like, is there any sort of, do the state basically cover any of the mental health care side of it, or?
There is free services available. There's one called Talk to Me, actually, which is you literally text them and they'll call you, or you call them, and it's just like a free service where you can talk to someone like a counselor on the phone, which is a huge thing for people.
Wow,
because
that's really, I didn't know that was there.
There is a couple actually, and I just can't remember the name of the other one, but these are huge because of the fact of, like you say, people think it's just going to be a lot of money. It is a lot of money to go through the private system. The public system, I've met some very, very good people in there, and they've been very helpful. I suppose when I went to the Athlone one, like I said, I had an amazing psychologist and the CBT, but the psychologist left on maternity leave, and another psychologist came in, and it just wasn't working. Like my whole thing of being anxious was not wanting people to sit near me. It was too intimidating. So when I had the first psychologist, she sat over the other side of the room, but this psychologist
give you your space.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just nice. But this one pulled her seat right up next to me, and that was just her style, and that's how she did it. And I'm not criticizing her in that sense, but it just didn't suit me. And I can't remember if I could decided in a big huff that I didn't want to go anymore, because there is moments where you just really get frustrated. And my fair play to my mom, she decided she'd go in and take that meeting, that they wanted to see me because I said I wasn't coming in anymore, and she was pretty good about it. I wanted to get the electric convulsive therapy, and they wouldn't let me get it. And
wow. Okay. So why did you want that?
I
suppose you should. Maybe I should ask you what it is first, because I know what it sounds like.
Yeah, it's what you probably have seen in the kind of draconian way, where they put the large bolts either side of your head and send the electricity into you. And of course, it's not quite as dramatic as that anymore in the way it's done. It's much more controlled, thankfully. And it stimulates the front part of the brain here, where your personality is really. And I just heard a lot of good things about it. I'd read up about it, and it was just one of those things that I thought, I think this might help me. Nothing else is working. This was like 4 or 5 years into it, we'll say. But they said no, because I'm creative, and it's not good for people, creativity, who are creative. And also it does affect your memory a bit. Now, unfortunately, so do, tablets, I believe. I believe now, this is not a conspiracy. Kind of is actually, but it's my conspiracy. But I do believe that my mental health, anxiety does affect memory, because you're too anxious to remember things, so I have noticed that that's part of it. So, but they said no to the electroconvulsive therapy. And
out of curiosity, why did you want it? Like, did you do the research online, and what made you decide, right, that's what I want?
Yeah, I did the research online. I read a lot of testimonials. I had probably heard of some people that I admired who had gone through their own difficulties and had it, and this was maybe back when it was more severe, and they said it worked for them. So I just decided, when you get your mindset, your just mindset on that. And look, they said, look, they had the reasons for not doing it. And I thought, well, look, they know, but I'm not going back to you. And so about a year later, I was starting to struggle again. And, I thought, I can't go back to the Westmead one. I'm after like throwing my toys out of the pram. So fortunately, I live in Roscommon. So I went to the Roscommon one down the road. And again, it set me up really well. I got a good few sessions in. And one day, about 3 years ago, I was sitting at the end of the hall, and somebody was, and look, we were all in there for a reason, but somebody was blasting music from an iPad, right? It was about 100 degrees in there. There was people screaming and all sorts of noise. And I just said, I walked out. Is the wrong thing to do, because they thought, where has he gone? I wouldn't answer my phone. They obviously thought it was stupid of me to do it. But I got in contact with them, and I haven't been since. But they did ring me and say, look, if you ever want to come back, you can. But it's hard when you've got anxiety to go to places like that where it's just
sounds really overwhelming, even without the added anxiety factor.
Yeah, and like the whole thing about it, I'm trying to think rationally about it. That person who had the iPad up full blast, that's their way of getting through, that moment in the corridor. So, you have to take into, account for people have different ways of dealing with things. And mine wasn't very good, just walking out. I should have told them. Well, like I said, I haven't been under that kind of treatment. But I like going back to what you were saying. It's very difficult to get in there. It just takes a long time, and if you are very unwell and really struggling, the idea that you're told to come back in 3 months is it's kind of heartbreaking, and it's for a lot of people, they won't go back. They may feel better in 3 months. They go into their appointment, and the doctor says, you seem in good form. We'll put that down in the form, and you can head off. But 2 weeks later, you could be down at the dumps again. Particularly with a kind of a major illness, something like bipolar or something. So, yeah, like you said, the public thing it's not ideal. Put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, God. And then, so I suppose, do you want to talk about your podcast a little bit, maybe?
Yeah.
That's been going for what? Over a year?
Over a year now. It's like the episodes coming out this week is 61 episodes. It's every week. Obviously, I'm regretting the fact that I put weekly in the title. But on the other side of that, it does keep me busy, and it keeps my mind on kind of constructive, creative things. When it started, I knew the mates that I had around were going to come on, and that they were going to be easy interviews. And then there was a point where maybe I think I did 11 episodes on my own because of the coronavirus, the lockdown and stuff. and I didn't set up the Zoom. I thought, oh, it'll kind of take away from the interviews. I realize now it doesn't, which is great. But at the time I did, and I did a few, managed to get some people back in. But the real challenge came, and you'll know this, but like having yourself on, where you know someone from YouTube or the internet, and you don't know anything about them, their personal life as such, apart from what they allow you to see, and you have to like compose an episode and hope that it doesn't dry up after 20 minutes, where you've covered everything, but at the same time, there's huge amounts, more from the person to come. But it's I do get driven. Anxiety is an amazing thing to use as a tool as well. It's normally beating you over the head, but you can use it to drive yourself on if you manage to kind of work it right. And that's what I've been using it for the last year and a bit. And
so I think I sort of understand what you mean. So you probably nearly over prepare yourself for these podcasts because and that way you're using your anxiety to your advantage. Is that kind of what you mean? So you're like really well prepared then, and that actually benefits you.
Yeah.
In the long run.
When like, do you get nervous before doing podcasts?
I don't know if I get nervous before doing podcasts, but there's definitely things where I will get nervous beforehand. Yeah.
Like I haven't done anything like in years. I used to play in a band and I used to get quite nervous before going on stage, but I was always told that's a good thing. You need to be ready.
I get really nervous actually for doing stand up. Yeah, really nervous.
Yeah, but do you like? I always think that if it was gone, if the anxiety was gone, I don't think you'd perform as well.
No, I don't think so either. No. Because it's total adrenaline. Like you get up, obviously it's different for music, but I know for stand-up comedy, like I feel I'm really, really nervous. I get up there, I sort of, start talking, and the first laugh, then it's like the nervousness disappears, but the adrenaline is still at an all-time high. So it's like, then it's all good. You know what I mean? And then you're on such a high afterwards as well.
Yeah, I agree. Like, and it's I wonder how different it is for music and stand up, because it's that idea of like getting your first clap or getting your first song out of the way, even, and that idea of you are on a adrenaline thing. You do have material in your head, whether it's like jokes or chords or whatever it is. So when I'm doing the podcast, it's that whole thing of turning the anxiety into a positive. And I'm not sure, like you say, I'm not sure I'm nervous about the actual talking anymore, which is incredible for me because I used to be petrified of anybody. But it's the idea of just being on your toes at all times, because there was an episode where it wasn't your episode, but there was an episode where I ran out of stuff after half an hour. Like I ran out my questions. And the last half hour of it was just riffing. Me and the person were just going back and forth on different things. And it made for just an amazing podcast. So maybe it's all right to kind of let go of that,
Yeah, of the structure a little bit, yeah.
But but it's been brilliant. Like we've had great guests. We've been very, very lucky to have people like yourself and other people who I've admired and who I've seen do things that, I'd love to do myself. And I find it amazing when somebody says yes, like even when it's my friends, it's still like, oh, I'm always expecting, no, I'm a bit busy at the moment, I can't do it. But when someone says yes, it's amazing.
And the podcast normally, when you normally talk to your guests around mental health issues, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, I'd always ask about when they first became aware of mental health. That's always the question we ask at the start. I would do something like, if we were talking about stand-up comedy, for instance, I would go into the fact that, like, has it helped your mental health? Have you, like, when you're having a bad day, what do you go to? Like, do you stick on a film or a song? Because, it's not, I don't want it to be all about people that just mental health. I want people to know that on bad days, you can use these tools.
Yeah.
That I
and
talk
that's really
about.
Helpful to hear from lots of different people, coping mechanisms and stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. It's amazing. And people have amazing ways of dealing with things. And sometimes I'm like, no, I won't be doing that. But I've tried stuff.
Yeah.
Like I've heard of like all the sound baths and these things, which I didn't know what they were. And But now I'm like, I might give them a go and I can get back and do those things. And I hope other people kind of go, yeah, I might try that. It's all about just trying things out and see what sticks, really.
Yeah. Well, everyone who's watching and listening, you should go check out the Weekly Wheatley. I'll have all the links down in the description, and I'll have the link to our episode to go through and have a listen. We weren't video, so my episode's audio, but you're now on YouTube as a video podcast, which is very exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And yeah, I suppose congratulations on a year of the Weekly Wheatley as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing. I can't believe it, but we'll keep it going anyway.
Do you want to remind everyone where to find you and the easiest way to find you?
Yeah, the Weekly Wheatley on YouTube, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and then the podcast platforms, the main ones, Apple and Spotify and the rest of them. So yeah. And
just because I'm not sure if I was clear about it at the start, just to explain in case anyone's wondering, Wheatley is your surname, so that's why it's the Weekly Wheatley.
Yeah.
In case someone's like, what's a Wheatley?
I didn't think of that, but yeah. And I just want to say, I did not pick the name. I picked 5 names and I put them down, and I love the other 4, but the vote went for the one that I didn't really like, but it makes sense.
You actually said we a couple of times. Do you have somebody who works with you on the podcast, or are you doing what I do, which is the royal we, when I'm only referring to myself?
Yeah, I wish it was the royal we. No, I do. I have John Francis. He does all the tech stuff for me, and he's brilliant at it, and he doesn't complain about all my requests. And you'd know way more than me about tech, right? But the idea of asking a really stupid question, he doesn't say that's a stupid question. He's very nice and says, "Oh, this is how you do it."
He takes a deep breath and then he explains it to you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
thank you so much for watching. The Storytime Podcast is on YouTube as a video podcast. It's on your favorite sound platforms, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. If you could give us a review, that would be great. Really help us in those rankings. And check out the Weekly Wheatley. Links are down below in the description on all the platforms. And thank you for joining us, Derek.
Thank you very much, Claire. I appreciate it. And thanks everyone for listening.
And thank you so much for watching and listening. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
This podcast was brought to you by The Shift. For more like this, check out theshift.ie.